Good morning and welcome to the Ministry of Housing, a digital workshop series empowering houses of worship to understand the real estate development process. Today is May 7th, the final of our 6 programs. And this Ministry of Housing program was a partnership between the San Francisco Interfaith Council and DCG Strategies. Week 6, here we are with how to partner with local government. If you did miss any of the previous events, you can find those at youtube.com/SF Interfaith Council. And this final series will also be put up later today. In today's program, we explore San Francisco's unique development context and introduce the role of the planning department. Participants will learn how to work with the planning department and what planning initiatives and resources are available to support housing development projects in the city. We're excited to welcome the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, who will explain how congregations can access city resources to support housing. A special thanks. The Ministry of Housing Workshop Series is supported by a grant from the San Francisco Foundation. A bit of housekeeping. Today's program is being recorded. For audio and video, all participants are muted and without video to minimize distraction. For chat, you can submit a question or comment by selecting the chat button at the bottom of your screen and sending a message to Q&A. Questions will be forwarded to the host and answered time permitting. For closed captions, select the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and click Enable Live Transcription. And at this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to the Executive Director of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, Michael Pappas. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Trey. Good morning. I'm Michael Pappas, Executive Director of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, and on behalf of the SFIC and our collaborating partner, DCG Strategies, I want to welcome you to this final segment in a 6-week online series entitled The Ministry of Housing. This series is made possible by a generous grant from the San Francisco Foundation. According to San Francisco Planning Department records, there are 800 properties in our city owned by religious entities, many of which are underutilized and whose faith communities are struggling financially. At a time when San Francisco is in dire need of more and affordable housing, the leadership of these entities also recognize the moral obligation to be responsible stewards of their properties in order to provide for the greater good. In response to these needs, at the height of the tech boom and soaring real estate prices, the most prominent faith leaders in San Francisco gathered and formed the Interfaith Essential Housing Task Force. Collaborating with and drawing upon the generous wisdom of DCG Strategies, this task force seeks to achieve its vision of helping its diverse constituencies transform their real estate assets so that those properties may realize their potential and help provide the sorely needed housing for San Franciscans who otherwise would not afford to live here and thus would be forced to relocate. Building upon the highly successful recent in-person workshop of the same name, this series is designed to cast a wider net in assisting and supporting congregations and religious institutions contemplating developing their properties for affordable housing. Realizing that developing property in a city like ours can be daunting and is not the primary field of expertise of congregation leaders, it is our hope that the curriculum being offered in this series will provide the unique opportunity for attendees to learn from leading industry experts, including architects, affordable housing finance specialists, developers, attorneys, and the San Francisco Planning Department. Explore public and private funding solutions to support development and learn ways to partner with real estate professionals to reach their goals. Thank you for taking the time to join us in what promises to be an invaluable learning opportunity. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce friend and valued colleague Landis Graden, founder and principal of DCG Strategies. Landis, can you believe we're at the final segment?
We're at the final segment. It's actually been we've had a great time. It's been great. And thank you again for your leadership.
You and I have been partnering good gosh, since 2015, 2016. And I feel like this is a next step in our journey. We've got a ways to go, but I think we've done something good here.
I do too. And Michael, your vision, again, I say this every week, but I can't just emphasize it enough. Your vision to make sure that congregations are being equipped to be successful in their housing journey is just, for me, it's a gift to the universe. And I just want to thank you for that leadership, your stewardship over this entire series, your professionalism, and your commitment. You stayed true to this path, and we're going to see the fruits of this. So just thank you.
Thanks for your generosity.
So I just want to do a recap of where we are today. And if you've been with us this entire journey, this is a refresher. If you haven't, then you will I would encourage you to go back to session 1. And what we've done here is we've put together 6 building blocks. And what we looked at, these are best practices. As a faith-based entity, you do not have sometimes you do, but most folks don't have that internal resource, that internal expertise to show up in a way that empowers you along this journey and that makes sure that you get to your desired outcomes. Even though there are a lot of partners involved, we really are focusing on what your true desired outcomes are. And we've laid out a pathway for that. And so week 1 was just about, is there a there, making sure that you have the legal ability to develop your housing, that the capacity is there in terms of unit counts, and that you have internal alignment organizationally. So before you jump out into the space, that we just want to do a litmus test. Is there a there? That's what we acknowledge you do on step 1. We also highly encourage that you bring in an owner's representative. That's something that we do, but this is not a DCG commercial. This is for you to make sure that you seek out. There could be retired construction managers, architects, folks that come from the development community. You may have a member in your congregation, in your broader community that you can pull in to support you. When we go into legal proceedings, we bring a lawyer. Someone sells a house, they bring a broker. And we recommend that you bring a development owner rep with you to represent your best interest as you go through this journey. That's the person who will kind of facilitate your walk. After you've done that, is there, we moved over into an architect. That's where we get a little bit more granular in terms of capacity. Affordable housing, especially subsidized affordable housing, requires certain economies of scale and other variables that will help ensure that you're successful. And so week 2, we visit with an architect to just talk about how do you hire an architect, what do they do, and what are some of those best practices. After we've looked at the architect, the next thing that we recommend you do is bring in a financial consultant. Now we're looking at how does this make financial sense? Now, this is long before you've signed a development agreement. This is not going from idea and then you partner with a developer. This is you doing your own learnings and establishing your own foundational understandings of what you're wanting to endeavor so you can start uncovering what the risks are and how do you get to your outcomes. So week 3 is about bringing in, step 3 and week 3 in our series was about bringing in a financial consultant to walk through where does the money come from? How long does it take to accomplish putting together construction financing, which is very expensive in our state, especially in San Francisco. And then how does that money get used? So just that understanding of the financial program. After we do the financial program, now we're ready to start talking to developers. And this is where we're now looking for a developer who's a good culture fit for us, someone who understands what we want to accomplish. And now we're looking for a good fit. But you're going into that conversation armed with information. You already know most likely who you want to serve. Is it families? Is it seniors? Is it another vulnerable population? You have a good understanding of how many units your site can produce. And then you also have a good understanding of just how much money it's going to take. You're now in a really good position to start interviewing developer partners. And we recommend you talk to at least 3, unless you just have a relationship that you just trust and you want to go forward with. And there are different ways in which you can potentially partner with a developer. One is being a co-developer, which we emphasize is where you show up in the transaction as a co-developer and you share the upside and you have some semblance of control in that partnership. We talked about lease and sell as options as well. After you talk to your developers and you're going to land on one, then we brought in an attorney because that's another critical person on your team There are a lot of legal documents, corporation formations, and just things that you just need to understand. And we want you to have your own representation because your attorney is going to protect your best interest. So week 1 is there. Week 2, architect. Week 3, financial. Week 4, now we're talking to developers. Who are they? Where are they? What do they do? What are they good at? Week 5, helping you understand your legal representation, what that means. And now we're at the final segment, is dealing with local government, which is where you cannot have a project unless the city approves it. Now, there is SB4 and other legislation that does support houses of worship in this affordable housing journey, but we are wanting to demystify working with local government. And sometimes it can be very intimidating. And there's a lot that goes into it, and it's very technical. And we brought in San Francisco experts that are going to be able to just walk you through what it means on their side. And what you're going to learn is you are empowered to work with them. You're empowered to call them. You're empowered to ask your own questions. And what we've done is we're removing these barriers of understanding. So at the end of the day, you can show up fully empowered. So with that being said, I'm going to bring in San Francisco's Director of Planning, Rich Hillis, and then he's going to start the journey and then he'll have others join us as we talk through what happens within the city of San Francisco. And then you might be able to take some of these principles in your own local jurisdiction. So Rich, good morning, and I'm handing it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Landis. Thank you, Michael, for putting this together. And just for both of your continued effort and push to try to get more housing and more affordable housing built in San Francisco. So today I'm joined by Esmeralda Jardines and Mara Blitzer. Mara's from the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development. Ez is here with us in the Planning Department. Julian Benalis is also here from the Planning Department. And if there's one thing, we hope you take away, because we're going to get into a lot of details and process and how rules have changed, but we want to be your partner. I think this is a good title to this workshop, is how to partner with local government. Although we are a regulator and ultimately have to approve and look at plans and make sure they're compliant with either state rules or local rules, we do want to partner with you to get housing built in the city. And that's whether you're looking to build 2 units or 2,000 units on your site. And we know sites vary in our different zoning districts throughout the city, but we do want to partner with you. And we want you to call us and help kind of brainstorm what a project could look like for you. Just because we're at the end doesn't mean you should call us at the end of your process. After you have a lawyer or a developer, we're happy to work with you at any point during this process, whether it's your board is just thinking about it and wondering how many units you can get, or you've got a developer on board to get ready. As you probably have heard, we've just completed, or about a year and a half ago, completed our housing element, which is our broader city policies to accommodate our housing needs in the city, both market rate and affordable housing. And the state has required us to plan for over 80,000 units of new housing, 40,000 units of which need to be affordable. And that's obviously a state requirement, but I think Michael said it best. I think we all have kind of a moral obligation to build housing in the city and the region and to build affordable housing. So we are excited to look at those 800 sites and partner with faith-based organizations to chip away at getting to that number. There's no one silver bullet that's going to get us to 80,000 units or 40,000 units of affordable housing. So we recognize working with owners of sites and project sponsors is the way we're going to do that. So I don't want to take up too much time. I'll turn it over now to Ez, who will walk through what we do at planning and how we can partner with you. And then Mara will take over and get into more of the details of how we partner with organizations to build affordable housing, and happy to answer questions. But again, we want you to be able to call us. We'll come out, we'll talk to you, we'll visit your site and figure out how we can get housing built on some of these 800 parcels. So thank you very much for your continued partnership. Ez?
Thank you, Director Hillis. Good morning, everyone. My name is Esmeralda Jardines, and I'm a senior planner here at the San Francisco Planning Department. So today we hope to introduce you all to the Planning Department, who we are, what we do. We do want to share two specific state laws that are currently in place that are applicable to you all, which is SB4 and the State Density Bonus Program. We want to cover what objective standards are, as well as what we mean by affordability. And we do want to share one real world example that utilized a similar program to SB4. This was an SB35 project that also coupled it with the State and City Bonus Program, and that was at 4200 Geary Boulevard. And then most importantly, all of the various resources that our department has available to you all and who you can contact here at the Planning Department. So at a very high level, we have various different functions as a planning department, but most specifically, I think for this conversation and what we'll get into today is land use and building form. So our department is concerned with how a building is being proposed, how high it is being proposed, the land uses within it, the amount of residential units. So we as a department primarily focus on compliance with local and state laws as they relate to land use and more specifically housing. And then our department is also implementing sort of the affordable housing program here at the city and county of San Francisco. So planning review at a very high level occurs prior to a building permit being issued. It's schematic. A planning approval in San Francisco is commonly referred to an entitlement. And when one pulls a building permit application, you're sort of executing on that approval and that entitlement. Pardon. So the way it is now with all of the various sort of state laws that are in place, the planning department is tasked with creating more opportunities for ministerial review of code complying projects. So this means no more sort of CEQA, no more environmental review, no discretionary hearings are required, only objective standards may be applied. And California jurisdictions are now required under these ministerial programs to review and approve projects within 90 to 180 days, depending on the size of the project. And usually 150 units is that threshold between 90 or 180. And then we are also tasked with broadening the application of state and city bonus. So objective standards are those that involve no personal or subjective judgment by a public official and are uniformly applied. These are quantifiable standards that are published and understood by the public entities as well as private entities. And we hear a lot of 100% affordable housing versus mixed income housing, the latter of which does have some inclusionary component to it. But essentially, the number of deed restricted units in the project is what's going to differentiate 100% affordable housing project versus a mixed income. And then that's going to inform the role of the city in requiring and regulating the affordability of those units. We will hear a lot of area median income and AMI within these two presentations. And at a very high level, that just means that's the unadjusted median income level for San Francisco as published by MOHCD and informed by HUD data and updated on an annual basis. SB4 is an existing state law that creates a ministerial approval process for code complying multifamily housing development. So these are projects proposing 2 units or more. No more CEQA or environmental review is required. There are no discretionary approvals. And this most relevant for you all, these must be developed by nonprofit or religious institutions and other entities on land owned by religious or education organizations as of January 1st of 2024. And the on-site affordability requirements for these types of projects are 100% affordable at various AMI and income levels. There are location criteria for SB4 projects, so these cannot be on farmland, wetlands, fire hazard zones, hazardous waste sites, earthquake fault zones, flood hazard areas, floodways, conservation lands and easements, nor protected habitats. And this is something that, again, how we would partner is we would identify and assist you all with running a screening to ensure that the sites that you're all considering sort of qualify and are outside of these boundaries. And then some additional considerations are proximity to sort of freeway exposure, which might have some sort of air filtration requirements, whether a project is proposing the demolition of residential units, the demolition of historic resources, as well as proximity to industrial uses. And that's sort of the process that may be relevant to you all. Then we have the program, which is state density bonus law, or could be. These are sort of both optional. And for SDB, a project must be proposing at least 5 units or more. It has to be a residential project. It can be mixed use. There are affordable units that must be provided on site, and they must be affordable for 55 years. And if also satisfying the inclusionary housing requirement, they must be deed restricted for the life of the project. And a subset of SDB has something carved out for 100% affordable housing projects. And these are sites that are within a half mile of a major transit stop. And if proposing 100% affordable, they can receive unlimited density, 3 additional stories in height or 33 feet, up to 4 concessions or incentives, and unlimited waivers. And we'll cover what those are shortly and the differences between the two. So waivers of local development standards are any sort of deviation from a quantifiable objective standard or metric, and they can include height, bulk, or rear yard. They must be necessary to accommodate that sort of increased residential density, and are generally sort of volumetric controls. Incentives or concessions are really similar to waivers. They are also sort of deviations from quantifiable objective standards or metrics, but these must result in a reduction of cost. So that's the sort of difference between an incentive or concession and a waiver. But similarly, they can include open space height, ground floor ceiling height, and other examples. And then we did want to highlight one real world project that utilized SB 35, which is again really similar to SB 4 and state density bonus. And this is 4200 Geary Boulevard. And this project, from start to finish, review and approval, was completed within 180 days. It is 100% affordable. They were proposing 98 units for senior housing. This project received 3 additional stories above its existing sort of underlying height, and the density bonus increased from 27 units to 98 units. And the waivers that this specific project sought were rear yard, usable open space, and dwelling unit exposure. And some resources that we wanted to share with you all. We know we covered a lot of technical information, but all of this is further clarified and published in various directors' bulletins on the San Francisco Planning Department's website, most notably, I think, DB5, which covers all of the various ministerial processes. We only covered one today, but there are many, many others. Just highlighting again for you all, your main point of contact is Julian Bañales here at the San Francisco Planning Department. But we have so many mapping tools, and we have the permit center, and we have the planning information counter. And if you need additional sort of time, we do have a project review meeting process where you can come into the planning department, meet with planners, meet with housing experts, and ensure that you are equipped with all of the information that you need. So now we are going to volley over to Mara at MOHCD, and we'll take questions at the end.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Mara Blitzer. I'm the Director of Special Projects here at the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, or my dining room. Today, we have a presentation for you, and I just want to echo what has been said before, which is that we are quite happy and interested in talking with each of you further on an individual basis to answer any questions that you may have, and really want to acknowledge the vast amount of information that is being shared with you today. And one of the points we want to make this morning is that this is a long haul partnership, not only during the initial feasibility and potentially initial lending process, but over the life of the project. Any affordable housing development organization will be in partnership with MOHCD. So you kind of have us for life, which we are happy to do. But I think that really informs how we think about this early stage. And again, just really want to encourage you to keep talking with us, keep asking the questions, and we'll be there with you. All right, I got a technical. There we go. So a little bit about MOHCD itself, and then we'll go into some details about working with our office. Our mission is to support San Franciscans with affordable housing opportunities and essential services to build strong communities. We are actually one of 5 city departments that we call housing delivery agencies, and one of 3 that provides housing-related services. So we are not the only ones, and we do a lot of coordination with those other offices. I'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation, but that's relevant because when we talk about the city of San Francisco and working with the city of San Francisco, what we're actually talking about is talking with many different departments, including the planning department and MOHCD, but most likely others as well. So here's a quick snapshot of who else is delivering affordable housing in San Francisco. For MOHCD itself, you can see here that we are doing new construction, we're doing preservation and rehabilitation, and we also offer several rental assistance programs, some of which are building-based and some of which are tenant-based and can move with the household. We also have the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing, with whom we work very closely. Other offices, such as the Office of Community Investment and Infrastructure, that is OCII, the former redevelopment agency, the Treasure Island Development Authority, and we also work with the federal government, under which the San Francisco Housing Authority falls under that umbrella. And we also work with our partners at the Office of the Rent Board, which governs rent control. So this is a little bit about what we do from a broad perspective. We wanted to talk a little bit more about what affordable means, because I think for many people, affordable means different things. But in the context of this presentation and what we're trying to do at MOHCD, we consider housing affordable if that household can make a monthly payment without sacrificing food, well-being, health, or other essentials. And we're looking to make sure that their housing costs are less than 30% of monthly income. Some of the affordable housing programs actually set folks' rent at exactly 30% of income. Those are generally legacy HUD programs. Most housing these days is the rent is set at approximately 30% of monthly income through our low-income housing tax credit program. Just to give people a sense of a little bit about what we mean in terms of numbers with area median income, we've added this chart below that has some updated information about what median income is for a smaller household or a 4-person household, and what the approximate monthly rent might be. That monthly rent is adjusted by apartment size, not just related to income. And we'll come back to this in a little bit, but just to give people a sense of what that means. Someone who, for example, in a household of 4 who is earning a minimum wage in San Francisco earns about 35% of median income. We want to go deep on the use of a lottery system to access affordable housing in San Francisco. And San Francisco is somewhat unique in that we have citywide preferences that apply to all affordable housing that's being developed in San Francisco. Other jurisdictions sometimes go project by project, but for buildings that are built here that are 100% affordable housing, we are going to require every sponsor to participate in a lottery system. It's called Dahlia. It's an acronym for our city flower. Don't ask me what it stands for, but we do have this electronic application and lottery system that we at MOHCD manage to make sure that access to our affordable units is fair and equitable. And we wanted to familiarize all of you with these preferences because if you are to take a loan from MOHCD acting as the bank, in this case, you would be obligated to offer the units in your building in this particular way. So our lottery preferences include in the #1 position for former San Francisco residents that were displaced in the 60s and 70s due to the redevelopment agency's urban renewal program. Folks hold a certificate of preference and they get the #1 pick. If they are interested in the unit, they will float to the top of our weighted lottery. There's also a program for displaced tenants for properties that are 5 units or more, for tenants who have been evicted through Ellis Act or owner move-ins, or whose apartments were damaged by fire, natural disaster, and 20% of the units are set aside for folks in that pool. Then we have a neighborhood resident housing preference for San Francisco residents who live in the same supervisorial district as or a half a mile from the property itself. And 40% of the units are set aside, up to 40% under the neighborhood resident housing preference. And then the 4th preference is live and work in San Francisco. And just to add complication, if we haven't gotten everyone's head spinning so far, if you are a veteran, if you've noted that you're a veteran in your application, your application would go to the top of each one of these lottery preferences, depending on whether you are a certificate of preference holder, a displaced tenant, a neighborhood resident, or someone who lives and works in San Francisco. And that is also, there's also a preference for folks who have identified as having disabilities as well. So how does this lottery work? It's a weighted lottery. It works in this way. We would initially sort a massive list in numeric order that the computer, we used to use a like one of those bingo ball systems. Now we use a computer to make a randomly ordered list, and then we order that list by the 4 preference. And so here are example highlighted in red. Applicant Dan got lottery number 11, and Dan is a displaced tenant and a veteran. So you can see here that he ends up at the top of the list for displaced tenant units, 20%. So he was a lucky applicant. Really happy to talk with folks in more detail about how the lottery works. This is a really important part of the partnership in working with City of San Francisco. I'm gonna breeze through this, but in case you hadn't seen this lately, this is a graphic of the pipeline of affordable units currently planned in San Francisco. There are more than 11,000, and they are pending moving forward, waiting on construction financing. So when we talk about our pipeline, this is what we mean. And we have a little bit of a bottleneck right now. And so future applicants for housing kind of fall in line after these units that are already approved. Those projects are in this orange orange zone on this particular chart related to the development process. They are waiting, or perhaps the blue, they're waiting for their financing to start construction. On average, it takes about 7 years for an affordable housing project to complete. So from the twinkle on of an idea and a site acquisition to when someone moves in, that's an average, which means that sometimes it's shorter, but sometimes that's also longer. And that is something that can be very frustrating for those of us who are really passionate about the delivery of affordable housing in San Francisco. We want to build more and we want to build faster. And right now, this is a little bit about where we are. So that requires a fair amount of patience, along with all of the diligence and passion and resilience that's required to get the projects from start to finish. You, in session 3, got a lot of information about financing of affordable housing. We wanted to place MOHCD's own funding in the context of all these other sources. We're down here in the bottom right of this local capital. In our experience, there is very little 100% affordable housing that can be built in San Francisco without local capital, because of our circumstances as being one of the highest cost communities to develop in the country. So even when you combine local housing tax credits and tax exempt bonds and some federal capital and some state capital, and some subsidies, you probably also are going to need some other source of funds. It could be local capital. It could also be philanthropic. In most cases, our sponsors don't have access to big dollars in the philanthropic space. That may be something that some of the faith-based organizations have access to that some of our other organizations don't. And I wanted to make a quick note that here under federal capital, we talk about home and CDBG monies. Those are actually administered by MOHCD. We are an entitlement jurisdiction. And so for us, those are local capital. I'm going to leave it at this because you've already been briefed, and talk a little bit about MOHCD's own funding sources. We have many different funding sources. We put them into different buckets. Dedicated funds, which are variable in their size. You might recognize the Housing Trust Fund, the Citywide Affordable Housing Fund, which is made up of inclusionary fees of various kinds. The Low and Moderate Income Housing Asset Fund is monies that come from repayment of loans to the former redevelopment agency. And then there are area-specific development funds that are called out in the planning code. We also receive one-time allocations, including general obligation bonds, which have been voted on by San Francisco voters now 3 times in 2015, 2019, and 2024. We are so grateful for that support. And then we also receive some money from the state directly to us that we can administer. And then, like I said before, we have our home and CDBG allocations that come directly to us. We grade and blend and stack all of these many sources, 30 plus, into what will amount to a single loan from MOHCD at some point. MOHCD's participation in a project can vary by percentage. For a typical tax credit deal, probably around 40% of the funds will come from the tax credit equity itself, and between 35 and 40% will come from the city. So when I'm saying that folks kind of need to come to us for that gap space, you can see we are putting in a significant amount of local money into that stack. There might also be some state loans. There might also be debt. There might also be some philanthropy involved, but your primary sources are largely going to be the low-income housing tax credits and the city itself. An example project here, just so you can see a little bit about the numbers. This is 681 Florida in the Mission, and you can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sources. Sorry, 6 sources of funding. That's probably about average. 6 sources. We could see up to 10 in that braid or stack or stew of funding sources, and it is quite a puzzle to put all of the things together, but we do it all the time. And you can see example here on some of the restrictions and terms. You can tell this is a moment in time because the interest rate on the tax-exempt loan is 3.45%. Rates are double that right now. Capital markets are cyclical. And so when you propose your project, the capital markets are something that you and we don't control. And the higher the interest rates from the other sources, probably the more money is required from a gap lender such as MOHCD. We wanted to identify a few common challenges, and then I'm going to try and go quickly so we can leave time for questions. Public financing procurement processes, they are competitive. And that competition makes for really certain pre-development timelines. I refer you back to the 7 years average of development time. Some of that is very out of the control of the city and the project sponsors. You never know what everyone else has got cooking in their jurisdictions, and there's a limited amount of public monies. However, once money is secured, your construction has to start or be completed in a certain time frame. So it's a lot of hurry up and wait. And that requires a lot of resilience on the part of all of your development partners. And also, I mentioned before that we have 11,000 units in our pipeline, and those are currently MOHCD's priority. So new projects that are coming into our pipeline get into the queue. A little bit of other important details. We talked about this before, that affordable housing production is really dependent on project feasibility. We find that the ideal lot size is between 10,000 and 15,000 square feet. And that we're looking to develop projects that are between 80 and 100 units. Every jurisdiction is a little bit different. For San Francisco, we have found that size achieves the economies of scale in both construction and operations that we feel is necessary. We're looking for development teams with proven success and strong relationships. We find that they are the most successful. So I second what Landis said before about bringing in a trusted partner with experience. Partnering with the city is a really long-term commitment. We are looking for 99 years or the lifetime of the building, whichever is longer. And we find these days that new construction is the most cost efficient. And we do prioritize cost efficiency in the way that we seek our partners. So if you are thinking about renovation or conversion or adaptive use of an older building, we are going to look at that with kind of extra scrutiny and might prefer to see the new construction. I want to refer folks to the LISC Faith and Housing Resource Library. They have a tool that is related to organizational self-assessment, and we are really interested in your responses to these questions that are listed here. Primarily, we want to know that you know who owns the property and who decides on the terms of its disposition, particularly if your organization is a subset of a larger organization that may themselves actually have decision-making over the property. We need to go in eyes wide open about who can make those decisions. And I strongly recommend that everyone review these questions and have your answers prepared when you want to come and talk with us at MOHCD. our money is put out there in terms of loans. So we're making a loan with an interest payment that may be 0 to 3%, although the payments are based on what are called residual receipts, and that's the money left over after you've paid for all of your necessary other payments. We're looking for a long-term affordability covenant. We're looking for participation and support for our city preferences that I talked about earlier, where there's a lot of regulatory requirements like local hire and putting in public art, and also making sure that you maintain and fund capital reserves to make sure that you can fund the building's needs over time. That's something that we insist on. We won't go forward with deals that cannot support putting in monies ongoing for capital repairs, because your building has to be prepared to serve low-income residents for 99 years. Other considerations that you might see in a procurement, all of MOHCD's housing dollars are put out in the form of notices of funding availability or requests for qualifications or requests for proposals. In your cases, because all of you have access to land, you would probably be competing for city funds through a notice of funding availability. And we are going to refer to the housing element that Rich mentioned earlier, was recently completed, and also San Francisco's consolidated plan, which we are working on right now and will be ready next year. We're also looking at your competitiveness for state and federal resources, because the city is only putting in our approximately 40% of the total funds. And so we're looking at, well, how does the state think about their competitive resources? Are you in a census tract that is considered high resource? For example, we're also interested in what's the target population. And generally with our monies, we'll specify whether the monies are to go to senior housing or family housing. By family, we mean a household with dependent children, or folks who have been homeless is another category. There are many, but we would be interested in establishing that. As far as target income levels, the range that we are typically serving is between 30% and 80% of area median income, with an average at 60%. And a couple of notes about, if you rate categories as family housing, at least a quarter of the units need to be 2-bedroom apartments, and at least a quarter of them need to be 3-bedroom apartments. This is a really big need in San Francisco right now. And then a typical project, although not a fundamental requirement, is to set aside 20% of the units for people experiencing homelessness who are referred from the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. So I think we talked about this a little bit before, but the city is not, it's not just one agency. The planning department is who you'll see first, then you'll seek your permits, and you'll be talking with Department of Building Inspection and Fire and Public Health and the Mayor's Office on Disability and the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. You might be working with HSH, the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing, or DPH, the Department of Public Health, if you are interested in working on units for folks with special needs. And you might also be working with the Department of Early Care and Education if you're working on childcare, or the Arts Commission, or your local supervisor. So please keep that in mind when you think about working with the city. You're thinking about working with many different organizations. Lastly, at MOHCD, we do many different things. We work on tenant protections, we work on housing counseling, we work on community development, we do monitoring and compliance. These are all really important aspects of our work. These are examples of San Francisco projects that have been done on faith-based land. The I Hotel, Buena Vista Terrace, and St. Peter's Place. Call us and ask us for more information. Lastly, we have some specific references for you on our website. Please check those out. And there's much more available. And I'm wrapping up. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you this morning.
Landis, before we get to thank you Thank you both, all three of you. Landis, before we get to the abundance of questions that have been asked, and I don't know if we're going to be able to get to them all, did you have any technical questions that you wanted to put to our presenters today?
Yeah, just one. I think your fantastic presentation. I mean, very good, especially, well, I'm not going to cherry pick one piece. I really enjoyed the SB4 in particular because that's really a hot topic. Just one quick question because I want Michael to be able to get to as many as possible is what if there are scattered sites, just, a church or maybe they don't have a lot of units, but maybe they partner with another church and do a joint project, or it's a denomination and they have a couple smaller churches. I mean, how do you look at scatter sites in terms of just coming through as one project?
In terms of multiple sites, I mean, we've had that occur before. We have had projects that sort of are overlaid across various different parcels. I think we would just have to identify each block and lot, and then we would ensure that each site qualified for all of those location standards and criteria. But it's not uncommon or dissimilar to other projects that straddle multiple parcels and sites.
From a financing perspective, we would need to see that the ownership of those sites was a single entity.
Michael, that's all I had.
Thank you, Landis. Very comprehensive, very helpful presentation. And I'm glad now that we've got it recorded for posterity and it will go out to our 5,600 e-subscribers today. We have a lot of questions. And that means that these were good presentations. And I'm going to ask them in the order in which they've been given, and we'll get to as many as we can. The first one, and I will preface this saying that I know that you didn't write SB4, okay, but you're enforcing it. That's your job. It's a state law. But Rich, as you mentioned, we talk about the morality of housing. This is the morality of legislation, actually, from Anne-Marie Booth, the Reverend Canon Anne-Marie Booth. No environmental review? That's concerning, considering environmental impact is related to quality of life. Can you give some clarity in terms of, even though there is no EIR, there are standards that are set. Maybe you could speak to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, please, Rich, please.
Well, I would just say, there's no CEQA review, right? So you don't have to go through sometimes a long process with an environmental impact report that gets challenged by neighbors for reasons kind of not related to the environmental impact report. We saw that on the Irving Street project. That was an affordable housing project over on Irving in 20th, that the environmental impact report was used as a tool to kind of stop a project. But you're right, the regulations still exist. Things like the MOHCD ordinance to make sure the soil is clean. We work with the state in our local health department to still regulate what the city has on the books. You don't get around all of those just because you're not doing an environmental impact report. So those things still exist we regulate them, but I think we often see kind of EIRs used as a tool to stop a project for non-environmental reasons.
Thank you. From my dear friend, Reverend Penny Nixon, who's doing some amazing work, especially down on the peninsula, she asked if you could please explain the difference between waivers and concessions.
So they're great question, very similar in that they are sort of deviations or modifications from an objective standard, but incentives or concessions must result in a cost reduction. So there is a financial implication that has to be demonstrated. And that is the distinction between waivers and concessions or incentives. The latter two are the same. None of us understand why the state legislature chose two words, but yeah, it's cost reduction. And I just wanted to very briefly highlight and echo Director Hillis's statement and also clarify, again, we couldn't get into the details of SB4, but a phase 1 environmental assessment is required as supporting documentation to qualify for SB4. So there is some sort of analysis that we will sort of take under consideration, of course, the location standards to qualify for SB4.
Thank you. From James Fagler, what is the status, time, and timing of upzoning of specific areas of the city, i.e. commercial districts, assuming the SB incentives would occur above and beyond the revised zoning. Can a project be proposed in anticipation of the revised zoning heights, bulks, and requirements?
Sure. Well, one, there are both existing state laws make some changes to our existing zoning. Like you could take advantage of bonuses and whatnot through state laws, but we are also going through a process where we're looking to change the zoning, allow for additional housing on kind of the western side of the city, primarily focused on commercial corridors. And that has to be done by the end of next year. So certainly if you have a site, you think it's in the area that is going to be rezoned, or even if you have a site that you think should be in an area of the city that we should look at the zoning, the underlying zoning. Now is a good time to reach out and ask us about that site. We could tell you where we think we're going and work with you on either submitting an application based on the current zoning that takes advantage of bonuses or working to rezone that site. So we're open to options, and we want to hear from you if you think you've got a project where the underlying zoning doesn't work for a future housing project and should be looked at as part of our rezoning package. But regardless, that will be done, completed. It's required to be completed next year under state law.
Eric Johnson, you ask a bunch of questions. I'm going to ask the first one, and then time permitting, we'll come back. One of the challenges of costs of projects are the impact and building fees assessed on a project. Which fees can either be waived or reduced on these affordable housing projects, and how is this determined?
So for affordable housing projects, depending on the level of affordability that it is providing, if it's 80% AMI or below, the development impact fees are waived. For more moderate income level projects, they're sort of prorated for the units being provided above that 80%. So if one were interested in a fully sort of waivable development project, 80% or below, I would say is the strategy there.
And this is from Manson Long. And this is a good question. People's income change. Does the city do annual income reviews to adjust rent? Or do they pay the same rent even if they have income change, such as loss of one income from a family or a single person went into retirement, so the income would drop from, say, $4,000 to $1,800? What will development deal with the tenant's income change, since it will be much more than 50% of their income?
So the rent will stay the same.
Okay.
There are certain rental subsidy programs which take a different approach, and upon recertifying, if you recertify, the rent can be adjusted down or up depending on the household's income. That would be federal Section 8, generally speaking. But if the unit is not supported by Section 8, the rent is what it is for that unit.
From Tyler Stowell to Esmeralda. Will there be any objective design standards associated with housing developed under SB4, and what will they look like?
Great question, and very timely. We are in the process of working to develop objective standards related to design as a department, and I will defer to Director Hillis, but I believe those would apply to sort of any project seeking any ministerial or state program or local program. They're sort of just going to apply at a baseline level. So those are forthcoming. We should have some additional updates either this year or early next year. And I don't know, Director Hillis, if you wanted to share anything else.
Just to add that we're working with kind of the architectural community, the development community, affordable developers, to ensure that they're not onerous, right? That they work for projects. They will be fairly straightforward, but yeah, they'll be in place. We're not looking at them to be onerous.
Right. Yeah, and we've already workshopped them with the AIA and have vetted them with these communities.
I want to say a special thank you to all of you. We have more questions and multiple questions from some of the people who have already asked. I'm going to forward them to you all, and as you're able, if you're able to get back to these wonderful folk, we'd be most appreciative. I just want to say this has been an incredible journey, and I want to specifically give thanks to both Rich Hillis and Julian Banyalis, who I've worked with, and Landis has from the get-go. The city's sincerity in terms of working with communities of faith has been shown in its efforts. And both Rich and Julian and I have gone and visited with judicatory leaders. We've visited with houses of worship that are looking and have answered their questions. And I just want to, the city's been a great partner on this, and I know that they are sincerely wanting to work with the faith community, and Landis is nodding his head. So we're all on the same page with this. This has been a terrific series, and we are glad to be able to provide it, and also to provide the broader faith community with the resources needed to do what they want to do, and that is to be good stewards of their property. With that said, we will be getting out this recording link by day's end, and then a composite of all of the programming so that you can share it with your constituencies, and continue to partner with us in being part of the solution. So thank you so much. God bless you and God keep you.